as human beings, we're kind of wired to try to create outcomes. We're incented to, have a nicer home or to be able to afford a nice vacation. So we're always trying to do things to make things better. A lot of people will think the more hours I spend at my business, the more I'm going to improve. And that's not necessarily true. There's no correlation between effort and success unless you have some way of having a system.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is George Pesansky, who will share how to become a super performer. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. If you've ever felt like your business only works when you're putting out fires, this conversation is for you today. I'm talking with operations coach and author George Pesansky. He's a former industrial engineer who spent decades inside of paper mills, steel mills, factories, hotels, and even his own 100-year-old HVAC company, fixing the systems everyone else just learned to live with. George is author of Super Performance, and his work focuses on one core idea. Real success doesn't come from more effort, it comes from better systems. You already know I am a systems lover. When you can just run a system, life gets easy. We're going to dig into why there's no real correlation between your efforts and success, especially without a system. We'll talk about how to find your golden hour, how to stretch it, why leaders who think they're helping are often the ones creating the most friction and the most problems. We'll talk about the prison of expectations and the courage to say no. That's a big one. Stop being the superhero in your business, sleeping on the cot and working 24/7. We'll show you how to build systems that run without you and free up your time so you can enjoy your life. Let's meet George and see how it's done. Welcome to Richer Soul, George Pesansky. It's great to have you join us today.
Oh, thank you so much. A pleasure to be here.
And I'm excited to learn from you. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up? And how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Well, I grew up in central New York, just a little bit south of the Finger Lakes region in Corning, which was a company town. So if you didn't work for Corning, you probably did something that supported it. So I grew up in a family that was definitely lower middle class and learned a lot because my father worked in one of the factories and worked there for 42 years and watched him take the swing shifts, take the weekend duty, do all of the things that people who kind of support our economy do. And I learned that you can work really hard and you can get ahead, but there's going to be a limit to how much just hard work alone is ever going to propel you. And I think that was really my first lessons in understanding money, because from an educational perspective, back in the 70s, not a lot of sitting you down and talking about all of these things. So most of my experience has been trial and error, hopefully more trial and success than errors, though.
I grew up at that time frame, and that was kind of the shift of you do what your dad did, right? You go
Oh
to
yeah.
work for a company and you stay there your lifetime, and they take care of you and you take care of them. And that's the way it worked.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden it was like, well, you start to job hop a few times. Now it's like, oh, work is second to whatever.
Yeah, it's funny, when I came out of the military, I took my first job, and then I actually had an opportunity to leave that job, kind of shift my career after about just 3 years, and my father never kind of questioned or kind of pushed me in any direction other than just doing what I believed in and doing the right things, but it was one of the few things I ever remember him sitting me down and trying to correct me, say, "You can't do this. You've only been there 3 years. You're going to become labeled a job hopper, and you're going to have a hard time finding a job if you just jump around." And it was just such a generational moment of kind of his belief and just having that loyalty, that 40 years of time compared to what was happening there even in the 90s.
It took me a little longer to learn that lesson. I worked for a few different companies and I tended to stay there for a longer period of time. Looking backward, yeah, I mean, there's advantages to both.
Yes.
And it really depends on the situation and how things kind of come and go from that. So you were in the Army,
I was.
and did that teach you anything?
It taught me how to live without money. It's just great support, great respect for all of those members that kind of make their career. You don't get paid a lot, and it can at times be difficult to get by. And I was an officer, so I was certainly more well paid than a lot of our more junior soldiers. And even then, it was difficult to make ends meet. And I think I learned how to very carefully manage a budget and very carefully manage my costs, because it was the first time that I was really bringing in revenue outside of college and really starting to manage a household, and not having really any wiggle room to make a lot of mistakes.
So you decided not to be a career officer then?
I did. I kind of did my initial tour of duty and then moved into the reserves and kind of moved in and out of that over the next decade or so. But yeah, I left. I went through a military recruiter that specializes in military officers, and they placed me with a company. And I can still remember, and probably, it doesn't hurt to kind of maybe say it because it makes it a little bit humorous. I remember getting a job, and that job was going to pay $42,000 a year. And that was pretty much doubling what I was making as an officer at the time. And I just remember thinking, well, this is it. I've made it. I'm on easy street now. The rest of my life, this is all going to be good. It's all going to be gravy. And yeah, that started my civilian career of actually kind of getting out into business and learning so much more.
And there are a good amount of people who go from military leadership into civilian leadership. In corporate America, I don't know what the current state is, but there was a period of time in there where corporate America loved them because they did what they were told and they got the job done,
Yeah.
which I guess today they'd still love if people did that. But, that was what they well respected. And
Absolutely.
so it created a good opportunity for you.
It did. And I at the time, was just so thankful for this opportunity, so thankful for getting a little more wiggle room in my budget and buying a home and all the things that kind of came along with that. But, what I didn't fully appreciate or realize was I wasn't being paid that because they liked me. It's because they had some really significant problems, and everyone in that company had declined taking this job. And, and that's why we're out recruiting somebody from the outside who really has no experience in the industry at all, because it is just a huge challenge. And being able to be put in the position to have to rise to really significant challenges in the corporate world, something I know people deal with every day, but it was kind of my baptism in civilian life.
The good thing about that, though, is if you're successful, you're the golden child, right?
Yes.
Because you overcome what nobody else thought was possible. And so, from that standpoint, there's technically nothing wrong with it.
It was a great opportunity for me. And I learned so much in the military leadership, kind of discipline, all those things you'd expect to learn, and had some just amazing opportunities that really kind of shaped my strategy in terms of how I was going to be a leader, how I was going to help organizations. But it also helped me kind of endure difficulty. And I remember in those early years, the challenge was really a labor related problem, in an organization that was really challenged with some very significant labor issues. And I remember sleeping in my office, and, I had a lot of drivers, a lot of overnight crews and things like that. And they were just amazed. They're like, "What, don't you go home?" And I'm like, "Oh, no, there's problems in the factory. I'm going to stay here." And this idea that I was not going to go home until the problems were fixed was just so foreign to them. But for me, the idea was I'm actually sleeping on like a cot, which is soft, which is like 10 times better than what I did for the last 6 months. So, I'm happy, it's all good. I got a refrigerator over there with cold drinks in it. This is awesome.
There's another guy I know who does things like that. His name is Elon Musk. It's one of those traits,
Yeah,
that you find of leaders, especially, and the thing, because if you ever read his book, the key to him is he wants the engineers who design a product to have their desk on the factory floor. Because he's
yes,
like, if it doesn't work, you damn well be sitting there and fixing it.
yes,
And he will come in when things don't work, and he will go nuts for 2 weeks. Nobody sleeps, nobody does anything. We will be here until the problem is solved. And then once it's solved, he goes away and you're back to life. But that is, that's a type of commitment that gets stuff done.
it is. And I think, when you start seeing things from the perspective of that employee or that driver or that person who's kind of dealing with the problems, some of the problems in that particular example had been there for months, maybe even years before I had arrived. And they had just learned to live with it. They have kind of learned to tolerate it. And when you're willing to listen to what people are telling you about where the systems are not working or the problems and the issues in the process exist, and then act on it and act on it in a way that you're demonstrating commitment, that typically starts to build a lot of trust. And when you build a lot of trust with a team that you're going to do what you say what you do and deliver on eliminating these frustrations, these limitations, and help them be proud of the work they're doing because there's not silliness going on that is just frustrating. To me, that's how you can really build that potential, really get something good going on.
It's not often that the leaders in what we call the ivory tower will get down on the floor, meaning on the factory floor, and talk to frontline workers. And I work a lot with small business owners. And my number one thing is you have got to talk to the same thing as military, right?
Yeah.
You want to know what's going on in the battle. You need to talk to the front line.
Absolutely.
And if you don't talk to the front line, you've got a game of telephone coming along.
Yes.
And I guarantee you somebody along that chain doesn't want to look bad. Oh, everything's just wonderful. Everybody's smiling and happy down here on the floor and so creating that type of communication and people say, well, how often do I have to do this? Enough, right?
Yes.
Or when there's a problem. And it's the second part, you're actually listening and you're actually bringing about change. Because I think too often we talk about stuff, but we don't bring about change that needs to be brought about. And I know you're in this business, so you might be able to talk about it. Too often they hire a consultant to tell them what to do instead of listening to the people who know what to do.
Yeah. You're going to give away all my secrets here, Rocky. Yeah, so I am. I don't like using that consultant word because it certainly is never said in kind of joyous terms. But I do help companies try to improve. And the way I try to do it is not by telling them, but by helping the people who are already there learn the tools, the strategies, the techniques to be able to do it for themselves, to basically, feed themselves versus waiting for someone to feed them. And my number one strategy, my number one go-to is exactly what you described. I actually just a few weeks ago spent, the entire week working nights in a factory, going in at 11 p.m., leaving at 7 a.m. And it was fantastic. It was like the most invigorating thing I've done in the last year, maybe. And the reason it was so invigorating is how much I learned and how much the people really appreciated and respected the fact that I was there in the middle of the night helping them pack boxes and really experiencing all of the frustrations and issues that they had been dealing with literally for years and giving them a voice. And it wasn't me kind of trying to say, this is what you should do. It was translating what is already happening and has been going unheard. And being able to surface that, being able to kind of put it on the table where everyone has to see it, then that ability to get the decisions made, get things done starts to happen.
That it does. And a lot of times it's nothing more than communication and understanding and taking action to be able to do that. Now you also own your own company too. You own an HVAC business.
I do, yeah. As an investment locally, I 10 years ago kind of started a partnership with a friend who we own this HVAC home services business here in Schuylkill County, Pennsylvania, and it's been just an amazing journey. It's a business that's almost 100 years old and really, gone through all of the ups and downs. COVID, the crash, all of the things that have happened in the last 10, 11 years have been our journey. And we've persevered successfully, I might add.
You do work at Yingling?
I wish.
People don't know that's where the beer is made, right?
It is.
Where
America's
you're
oldest
located.
brewery. Yeah, right here. As a
America's
matter of
oldest
fact,
brewery.
right behind me here, if there was a window there, you might see the very tip of the smokestack.
Ah, nice. Yeah, it's amazing how these all things come together. So we're here to talk about your book. What inspired you to write the book, Super Performance?
I, had maybe more success than I deserve in the sense of really hitting the right tone, the right companies, the right messages at the right time, and was able to have, a 20 plus year career with My Blended Learning since I started the company, where we've had just, fantastic success. And it has been all about understanding the customer, on helping them be able to learn how to solve their own problems, the method and the strategies of how we train and teach these professionals to be expert problem solvers. And I only work with a handful of really large companies. They tend to be paper mills, steel mills, really large organizations. And a very close friend, somebody I've worked with for many years, sat me down one night at dinner and said, you're the best kept secret in process improvement because nobody knows who you are. That you work with us, you work with these couple of companies, you do these amazing things. There's so many people who've been affected, in their career by having these skills and being able to, generate value for their companies. You got to do something to have others benefit from this. And I thought, you know what, he's right. So super performance is basically giving away the secrets that I use to build a rather successful business for the last 30 years. And the things that we teach, the things that we do, the things that have helped these really large organizations that have paid a lot of money to develop these skills in their people, we put it all into around 300 pages.
And I'm a systems guy by nature.
Sure.
And so I just look at things, I'm like, oh, that's a broken system. So I understand where you're coming from because and when I look at companies, I just see, issues. I'm like, if they only did these three little things would move so much faster through the process. And yet I've learned that I can only fix what I'm asked to fix.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I have to let go of the other half of it.
Yeah.
And say, okay, if they don't want it fixed, that's not my problem, even though I have to deal with the results of that.
You and I should go to dinner sometime. We'd probably be a lot of fun with each other because I cannot sit in a restaurant and watch kind of the pattern of where the waiters are moving or how they're taking orders or how food is coming to the counter without calculating how much improvement they could have if they started to use a more efficient route. So you and I would probably have a fantastic evening.
Well, it's also, when I was in college, one of the things we learned, and I was part of computer science, I think, was something they call PERT analysis. I don't hear that word used very often.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it's basically looking at a project and going, what has to be done when and in what order so that everything comes together. You mentioned that because working in a kitchen is the exact same thing.
Oh, yeah.
Right? If I'm going to cook, a steak, a fish, and a casserole to deliver, which one has to go on first and what timing so that they all come out together so they go to the table together,
Yes.
hot and warm. And so I get that. On top of that, I look at the menu and I go, oh, they have pricing and problems in the way that they're showing their pricing and everything else. I like, oh, there's, they could raise this and lower that and they'd get more sales.
And the complexity of the menu items and ingredients that they're likely
Correct.
buying, right? Yeah, we definitely have to go to dinner, Rocky. We're going to have
We'll geek out over it. Yeah.
absolutely.
The problem I have is when they don't let me fix it.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm not in the restaurant, it's fine. But when my dinner comes out and it's cold or
Yeah.
they're not coming together, then that's kind of the issue. In the book, you kind of talk about one of the biggest things is, you look at Venn diagrams and it's vision, action, and strategy.
Yes.
And how they all come together. So could you expound on that a little?
Yeah, these are all words that you hear all the time, especially, from the consultant class, that we need a vision statement or I have a strategy that we're going to employ. And the reality is that a great vision statement looks fantastic on the wall. Strategy document makes a wonderful PowerPoint. But when you actually have a strategy that's aligned with a vision, well, that actually is starting to become a lot more useful. And what you're doing is you're answering a couple of really simple questions. Why are we doing this? Vision. What are we going to do? Strategy. And then the most important, the one that I think everyone misses, is how are we actually going to execute? So when you think about those three and you kind of layer them on top of each other as a business owner, I got to know my why, my vision. I got to have my strategy, my what. And then I got to really be effective in execution on how I go about achieving that strategy and ultimately, creating that vision. And I feel like people are good at 2 out of the 3 most of the time, and very few get all 3 right.
That is very, very true. It kind of reminds me of the book right behind me, Traction. Are you familiar with?
Yeah.
In a business, usually there's somebody with the big idea.
Yes.
And if you don't have the person, and I'm sure you're like this too, because I know it's me, who can take that idea and turn it into action, then nothing gets done.
Absolutely.
And do it efficiently and constantly improve it and make it better and better and build on that efficiency. And that's really what it comes down to. What I have come to learn is that we are a rare minority. Like I just assumed everybody thought like this. I found out they don't. Most people don't think in systems and in processes like that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Latin or something to them.
Well, I think as human beings, we're kind of wired to try to create outcomes. We're incented to, have a nicer home or to be able to afford a nice vacation. So we're always trying to do things to make things better. If we're trying to improve our business, a lot of people will think the more hours I spend at my business, the more I'm going to improve. And that's not necessarily true. There's no correlation between effort and success unless you have some way of having a system, because you can spend a lot of time wasting time and just kind of chasing the last, kind of random issue. It's like whack-a-mole. But once you create a system where you actually have the resources in your organization who are effectively executing a strategy and they're effectively, successful in the outcome they got to produce, the goal is to not need to be there. And by spending less time in the business and letting the systems be the systems and really kind of diagnosing issues with it, you can scale it and you can be a lot more successful with it. And it's, I think, true of small business and big business.
I always go back to the example of McDonald's. No matter where you go, you get the same product.
Yes.
Regardless of and they have a labor input problem.
Yeah.
And yet they have somehow figured out how to train and keep people to deliver the same thing, the same way everywhere you go. And
Absolutely.
That is basically a system.
It is.
And I'm sure across the years, they had lots of issues and they've constantly improved them. The funny thing is, COVID actually has made systems get better. And I don't know if you realize what the trigger of that was. California raised minimum wage. very high,
Yeah.
especially in restaurants. And so the restaurant said, well, how do we figure out how to build a system or a process or a machine that we don't need to pay the high wage?
Yeah. Automate.
And that's what they did. They
Yeah.
spent a lot of time thinking and being able to do that. Now, people are so much more apt to just, they don't even talk to a counter person, right? They go in and they touch a screen or do something and they're able to order. And it's funny, the first time I saw a Burger King kiosk, I had never seen so many people give up and walk away.
Yeah.
I'm like, y'all messed that up something big because you made it impossible to just order
Yeah.
a very simple thing.
Yeah.
But they've gotten better now. But that's what it is. And sometimes you need to be pushed to do that. One of the things you talk about in the book is the golden hour.
Yes.
What's the golden hour?
Yeah. So many organizations talk about their KPIs, the key metrics that they'd like to improve. And they want to create, these ideal outcomes. So I want productivity. I want, a volume of production. I want a certain number of transactions and, a number of covers in the restaurant. And they measure that at the end of the shift. And the reality is, it's not really a great way of measuring things because the people who are doing the work, they don't really know what's going on right now. That, how do I know if I've produced enough for the end of the shift or I've made enough covers or I've avoided these mistakes? The golden hour is about finding the moment where everything is working well and then starting to stretch it, trying to extend it, and really trying to sustain these ideal performances. So instead of looking at like, what did you do wrong or what is going wrong in your business, you're looking at when are those periods of time where things are going right? And am I doing those things consistently? Are those things a part of a system? Because when I can make those best practices, those things that are helping me succeed, something that it becomes a part of the way we all work, then I can take what was maybe a golden hour of success and make it 2 hours or make it 4 hours. And what we'll find is the people who are doing the work, they typically know how long has it been since we've had a problem. They know kind of what is that golden hour or 2 hours because it has gone well. It's not been frustrating. It's worked the way you want it to. And it's a great way to have kind of a leading indicator on how well our work is going, how well we're doing, and also then achieve the outcomes that, the owners, the business was trying to create.
That's interesting, and kind of stretching the good and
Yes.
focusing on that and then replicating it. When you first started to talk, I was also thinking about how do we remove the friction
Yeah.
from the process, basically, because
Yes.
usually that's what causes the trouble. Get rid of all the friction and let things move, and they will get done very quickly. This episode of Richer Soul is sponsored by the Profit Answer Man podcast. If you're a business owner who wants to scale and grow, increase profits, or want to have strategic conversations around your financials, then check out the podcast. You'll learn how to work less, increase cash flow, increase profits, and build reserves to help you weather storms. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. Let's kind of go to the opposite end of that. One side's the golden hour, and then on the other side, we have what you call Mount Stupid, the Valley of Despair, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah. I reference it in the book. It's actually, a thing your listeners can Google, and there's all kinds of images and articles. It's called the Dunning-Kruger Effect. And it really has to do with confidence and capability. So if you can imagine, kind of a chart where the amount of capability I really truly have is relatively small. I'm kind of on the left side of this axis, but my confidence is extremely high. And we probably all know somebody like this, and they probably might be a little younger where they've not necessarily had a significant failure, or maybe they've learned a lot about a particular topic and they start feeling extraordinarily confident in all of the things they know. and they're going to explain to other people because they're so sure of the way things are. This is sometimes referred to as Mount Stupid, because when people start to have a lot of confidence in their ability, but they have actual small amount of capability, they end up making a lot of mistakes. And they often ultimately end up kind of going over the edge of that mountain. And there's a sometimes somewhat difficult moment where you realize how little you know. And that is the valley of despair, where your confidence really just completely disappears, often because of a very embarrassing moment. And your capability got better in that moment because now you know what you don't know. And you can kind of look around at those resources, the experience, the body of knowledge that you thought you knew last year. And you realize there's a reason people spend 30 years doing this, because there's a lot to learn and a lot I can better understand. And I go on that slope of an enlightenment where for the next decade or more, I'm going to slowly get better, slowly get smarter, and my capability is going to grow, but it's now going to grow proportionate with my confidence. That I never want to be more confident than I truly am capable. That's somebody who's kind of on that slope of enlightenment. So yeah, the Dunning-Kruger effect. I've drawn this on whiteboards all over the world.
And I think you work in highly complex situations.
Yes.
I think there's an advantage to Mount Stupid. When you have a young person who doesn't know any better,
Yeah.
they will try all kinds of crazy things. And you know what? Sometimes they work.
Oh, yeah.
You're like, oh my God, why didn't we think of that? Look at how that worked. And so there's got to be that balance. But, sometimes it's good to do that and just see what happens, and you have a breakthrough and a new way of doing things. And you need somebody who's willing to take the chance, not someone who's stuck in their ways.
I agree. We actually have a name for that as well. We call it the prison of expectations, because as somebody really understands what they're capable of, they're going to always be wanting to obviously achieve the goals they're being given. So, you and I have a lot of experience. And if somebody was to say, this is the goal I have for you for next year, and I'm going to link, your promotion, your compensation to it, I want to make sure I can do it. So I'm going to try to make sure that that goal is something that I can achieve. And the reality is, if I do something really amazing next year and really exceed that goal, just completely blow it away, like you said, the younger person doing something that, they're just trying because they're just seeing what they can do. As somebody who's more experienced, I know the next year my goals are going to be 20%, 30% higher, because if I did it once, I can do it again. And those of us who kind of get jaded and we kind of learn more, we tend to hedge. We tend to hold back our capability, because if I put it all on the field, you're going to expect me to do it every single time. And those younger people are more willing potentially to put it on the field because they just don't know better. And they're just trying what they think is going to work. So you really want that element. You want people to be able to fail. And as long as we learn from it, then we succeed. We don't want, a lot of people hedging their performance because I just don't want a negative performance review. That definitely doesn't produce the highest potential outcome.
Those are the kind of people who are crazy enough to sleep on a cot in the office and be happy with a fridge full of drinks,
They're cold,
They're cold. One of the things that you talk about in the book was the power of defining the problem.
Yes.
And you mentioned this book too, The Goal.
My favorite.
And there's a thing in here that I think is just so powerful. The problem is it's at the end of the book.
Yeah.
But it really relates to what you're talking about. And they talk about the thinking process. The first thinking process should lead us to answer the question, what to change. The second process should answer the question, what to change to, and how do I cause the change? I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to.
Yep.
And I don't know that we ever define the problem clearly, what we want it to look like, and how we're going to bring about the change. And then how quickly, because I find change, especially the larger, anywhere, takes time, and people give up too early.
Yes. Yeah. And, we talked so much about how important systems are. And so what I do every single day is I work with clients, in some cases on site, in person, in some cases online. But whether I'm online or in person, 90% of my time is spent coaching. That's what I do. My LinkedIn profile says I'm an operations coach. I just try to help people perform. And the vast majority of my coaching is just helping them define the problem. And what I mean by that is, because people don't tend to think in systems, they see a problem and they say, I have an issue with this employee. I have an issue with this performance. I have an issue with this product. And what they're not defining is they have a problem with their training system. What they have a problem with is their ordering process. What they have a problem with is their preventative maintenance system. And what we're doing is we're blaming somebody who just happened to be unlucky enough to be working at 3 o'clock when the machine broke. And it could have been anybody, right?
There's a quote in the book that I think that kind of sums that up. The problem is the manager shouldn't be trying to fix the metric that's straight into the red. They should be trying to understand all the things that are going on around that metric. By focusing on the thing that's on fire, they miss all the things that are going on around it that are about to catch fire.
Yes.
And so you go on to say that leaders most commonly misjudge their own utility. They think they're adding value and they're actually creating friction.
Yes. I mentioned earlier, one of my favorite things to do is just go in and work. Just go in and run the machine, pack the boxes, go on the trips with the drivers, whatever that business may be doing, is you learn the most by far, just being as close to where value is being created as you possibly can be. The ability to really, kind of find where we lack systems is often by finding the superhero. And the superhero literally sometimes has a cape, like they put it on. And it's the person that we call when we have a problem. It's the person that we depend on to fix it. And we've always got a Bill or a Sue or a John, and they kind of swoop in and they take care of everything. They correct it, they fix it, they deal with it. And this was my father. He spent 42 years in that same factory, and he was their superhero and fixed everything. I see my father all the time now in factories. And if I can find him or her doing those things, they lead me to all of the broken systems because they're constantly fixing them. And that really shows us, it really tells us that, the leadership, the management is focused on the fire, focused on the problem, focused on calling their superhero to save them. And they don't recognize that the conditions, the circumstances around it, the system that it was supposed to be able to depend on is broken or even non-existent.
There's a lot of things they don't notice. That's why I'm in small business. I don't have to worry about these issues because I can fix them. And I work with business owners who were ready to fix stuff instead of dealing with layers of thought. It's funny as you talk about that. And as I was reading the book, you talked a lot about Japanese management processes. Yeah. And I think when we were younger, that was the big thing, how the Japanese were building things. I remember a story of an American company went to Japan and they're like, we need these circuit boards and we need them to have a 3% failure rate. And the Japanese look at each other and go, okay, we'll break 3 out of 100. Because to them, that was just unacceptable.
Yes.
That there would be 1 failure rate.
Yep.
Are we still focused like that, or have we gotten away from some of those concepts of what the Japanese had built from that type of culture?
That sometimes referred to as that lean culture, kind of the influence in manufacturing from, Deming and, a lot of the Japanese type of strategies, Toyota, companies like that. I think there's absolutely a cultural element to it. And working with companies all over the world, culture absolutely makes a difference. And, if I work with the German companies, the desire and degree for precision and documentation and complexity and making sure we achieve everything is absolutely not the same as an American company. And there are absolutely going to be cultural differences because of kind of who we are as a culture, just a, kind of a people. And obviously there's always exceptions to that. I think it depends on the industry where you see that desire for quality, that desire for, elimination and removal of waste, but it becomes an economic necessity as, kind of a global competitor, that if you're not operating waste free, if you're not operating without variation, if you've not removed your bottlenecks, then the costs that you have, the, level of performance for your customer requirements is likely to kind of sort you out. And, it's a bit of a necessity. And I think some organizations and locations and, places around the world will take to it like a fish will just take to the water. And in other places, you gotta kind of teach the rabbit how to swim. It's a little bit of a different animal, but rabbits can actually swim really well. You just got to teach them, right? Got to give them the chance.
I did not know that. One of the Japanese processes you talk about, you use the word kata, Japanese way of doing. And I actually took karate for a while, Okinawan karate, and that's what they teach you is kata.
Yeah.
And so it's a way of doing. Do these movements and follow these patterns so that you can learn the movements and the patterns. But the real key was in the little things that you don't really get until you become an expert. And the little edges and the reason why we do these things. And it amazed me to the level of depth that you could take a very simple process and go into such intricacies and such little shifts that have a dramatic effect. But until you're the expert, going back to what you talked about, the 30 years, you don't realize that little bit of how it is. And in the book, you talk about being systematic, knowing why and how, and then how to make it good and why the outcome came out. And you talk about this kind of from the standpoint of the adjuster and how they remove the friction from the system and lower the temperature of everything going on.
Yeah, in the envelope industry, which is kind of as people mail fewer letters, is a shrinking industry. There's a job called an adjuster that actually takes these very complex pieces of equipment and actually sets them up so that it performs ideally perfectly. And they're really, really good at following patterns, kind of having that kata, in the way that they work. One of the key themes that we talk about in super performance is this idea of knowing the root cause of your success, knowing the root cause of that golden hour that you had. And your point about, kind of karate and, kind of thinking about those nuances, those details. Well, there are some details that just don't matter. Like what color socks you're wearing doesn't make you better at what you're doing. But there are other things around kind of the balance that you may have, the position that you've taken that do make a difference, but you would never know it initially. It's going to be kind of when you find that deeper opportunity. I often use the analogy for those that have had the experience of swinging a golf club and connecting with that golf ball. It's kind of addictive, right? You do it a few times and you kind of make a mess of it, and you are embarrassed by how poorly you're able to do it. But if you practice a little bit and connect one time, if you got that ideal swing and you just hear that snap, then you're like, okay, now I get it. Like now I know why people love this game. The thing is, do you know why you connected that time? Was it the balance? Was it the grip? Was it the position? And a lot of people don't know because they just did it. And this is the idea behind kata. You're being deliberate about these steps that you're taking. You're being deliberate about the pattern you're following. So when I get up there to swing the golf club, I'm thinking about grip. I'm thinking about balance. I'm thinking about position. I'm thinking about shifting my weight. And when it connects, I know why it connected. And then that's what I can repeat. And that's why, you can play that entire back nine and, never have a slice.
I don't know about that.
It's a golden
For me, the reason it worked that time was luck.
Well, so many organizations, so many individuals, so many teams kind of look at it that way. And that really is so much the point of the book Super Performance. It is recognizing that it's not luck, that there are random events, and random events can always explain, unique outcome. But if you're having outcomes on a semi-regular basis, but just periodically being vastly disappointed in your golf swing, you actually know what to do. Your problem is just doing it consistently and knowing what it is that actually matters. And whether it's business or, kind of improving that golf swing, it is something that can be studied. It is something we can find the root cause for, and it is something that we can build into a system.
All right, you and I get this system thing, right? We know how to do it. We
Sure.
will do it just because it's in our natural ability to.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you deal with the people that aren't like us, whether it be on the front line, middle management, top leadership, like bringing this all together and actually changing the way things are done?
Yeah.
That gives me a headache.
It is challenging for sure. And, I call them the tinkerers. There are people who have a great deal of curiosity and a desire to always try to kind of make things a little better or always try something different. They're by far the most challenging personalities, the most challenging resources to try to get to adopt a systemized way of working, because their nature is to try to do something different every time or to see what would happen if I do this. So those are absolutely resources that need to be really closely managed. And I think even when you start thinking about hiring decisions, if I want to have a system in my business and I'm hiring a tinkerer, somebody who's always just going to monkey with things, that's great if you want to hire the superhero who's going to constantly be available and constantly fix everything for you. But then you only have one of them. I would much rather have everyone be able to do this work and not depend on that person who's going to put on the cape. So you got to think about those resources. When I was in the military, I ended up leading a tank platoon through a bunch of really unusual circumstances, and I didn't know anything about a tank. The gun was put over the back deck, and I literally thought that was the front of the tank because that's the direction the gun was pointing. So I assumed that's the direction the tank moved, and I didn't know a thing. The people who did the work actually taught me how everything was done. All those soldiers actually taught me how to kind of lead from a technical standpoint. What they also taught me is if I'm making all the decisions, if I'm telling everybody what to do, if I'm being kind of the micromanager, then the only things that are going to get done are the things I've told people to do. So how do you build a system? You get people to realize that if you can't walk away, if you can't step away and have things continue to work, then you really don't have a successful business. You have a lot of effort that's making money.
And that's very true. That one sometimes hits hard, which kind of also brings up the next question that you ask in the book that I thought was really big. But actually, before we go to that, I want to talk about soccer. So I coached soccer with the kids when they were young.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about soccer, right? Yeah. I know one thing, the ball goes in the goal, right?
Yep.
So I couldn't really necessarily teach the kids. Yes. But what I did was I just watched what they did naturally, and I put them in places that they created a system to move the ball forward. Like this kid say, I want to play this position. I'm like, you go play it. I don't know what the position does, but I know what the kid's going to do on the field because he always does it systematically because that's what that kid does.
Yes.
And if you can put the right pieces together and then you just teach them a handful of little things, the next thing you know, if this, then that, right? And the kids would just do it naturally. And it didn't matter what I said because they weren't going to listen anyway. They did what they naturally did and organized well. It all worked out.
Yeah. And, I think that's exactly what we've been talking about, because when you see those kids with that pattern, that kata, that this is just what they do when they get the ball. They're always going to go for the goal, or they're always going to pass to their friend, or they're always going to, kind of do some fancy thing in the middle of the field. If that becomes the norm, if that becomes the standard, then as a process designer, as a system designer, you can say, well, what would be the most successful way to get the ball to the goal? And I should put A here and B there and C over here. And as long as they have that pattern, as long as they kind of follow that expected standard, then it's going to work. And anybody who replaces them just needs to follow that pattern. And now we're building a system, right?
We are. And they didn't have to follow their pattern. I knew that these ones would do this and they went
Yeah.
together. And then I would just change out the entire line.
Yeah.
Because then the new team would come in with their pattern. And of course, that would confuse the other team because they got used to that pattern. And so now they're off guard because they didn't realize that, it's different people. So it was a whole different way of coaching and it worked really well.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Getting back to my question, though, which was in the book, and I thought it was a brilliant question to ask people. How many of your improvement efforts have lasted more than 2 years?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite go-to questions, especially if I'm with a senior management team. And the reason I love it is the more senior they get, the higher the number they give me, because they just aren't willing to believe that all of the time, all of the effort, all the things they do to try to make their organization better is only succeeding 20% of the time, surviving those 2 years. But the closer I get to the line, the closer I get to the place where the value is being created, the lower the number gets, because they're experiencing the practical reality that we don't use a pattern. We do consistently disrupt and kind of, react to varying situations without having kind of a more systems way of thinking about it, or really looking for the root causes. Or we're much more likely to blame somebody because they made a mistake than to look at the way the work is organized and recognize that it's mistake prone. It just happened to be unlucky. This person was working, and they're working with a very difficult system that is prone to having mistakes.
It's true. Now, I know you said most of your stuff was in the factory, but you also worked in the hospitality industry. You worked in hotels. We started this conversation talking about restaurants.
Yes.
The reality is, it doesn't matter. It's all the same problem.
It is.
It's just a system and a process. So I'd love for you to kind of expound on that.
It is. There's so much more alike than there are differences. And I know that some of the examples I've cited are talking about really large and complex organizations. But as I mentioned, I own a local small business, about a dozen employees or so. And the same problems, the same challenges, the same issues are in that company with 12 people as the one that has 1,200 people. And it is a little bit of human nature. And it is also the ongoing truth that if I'm asking every individual to come up with the best way they think to do the work, the waste, the variation, the frustration, and the disappointment is always going to be much greater than us collaborating on having a systematic way to do the work that's most efficient.
Our way of doing things. We go back to McDonald's. McDonald's has their way of doing things. You don't go in and you order a Whopper. They're going to go, sorry, we don't sell Whoppers.
Yes.
Even though they're a hamburger joint, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not the way we do things here. And small business needs to realize that. You need to have your things that you do well and say, we don't do that here. Here's what we can do for you. Would you like that?
Yes. I think it is sometimes saying no. We talked about some of these kind of Asian influences, these lean manufacturing organizations, Toyota, things like that. And, Toyota is often thought of as kind of a premier automobile manufacturer for cost and quality and all of the, metrics. And, you, as somebody listening to the podcast today, I challenge you to go out to Toyota right now and look at any one of their automobiles. And in your mind, think about, the white Toyota Corolla or any vehicle and decide that I really would like to have a red interior. And guess what? You can't get it. So what they have done is made decisions around the level of manufacturing complexity that they're going to allow, that allows them to have that great cost, that high quality, and the experience that you would come to find. So learning what to say no to and making sure that the things you said yes to, I can perform better than anyone else. I think for me as a small business owner is one of the more difficult things to do because you want to say yes to everybody. But the reality is that dilutes your ability and it often wrecks your systems because you're trying to customize everything versus having really solid offerings that you can do cost effectively and do extremely well.
Which means you should charge more.
That's right. Especially if you're at that level of performance.
Yeah. If that's the case, you need to do something special. You have to make sure you charge for it. Because
Yeah.
if you don't, you're going to probably lose money,
Yes.
especially if it's a one off that you can't replicate and build a system for to do again and again.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know, we own a Lexus, which is a hot, Toyota's
Yeah.
other label. And my kid drives it. That thing, it's old and it's a tank and it never has broken.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't break.
Yes.
You replace the tires and the brakes and you put oil in it. And it is just unbelievably how well they have built that kind of performance. And most luxury brands do not perform at that level.
Well, they're not designed to, right? There's a whole different outcome that though Toyota and Lexus determined around loyalty and around, the idea that I take my car and give it to my kid and then go buy a new one because I'm never letting go of this tank. It's absolutely amazing. And why would I give him some random used car that I don't know anything about when this thing is bulletproof? It's an amazing business model with great brand loyalty. And it's a pretty brilliant strategy they have.
They're just not as fun to drive. You
That's
can't
also,
have everything, right?
that's also a cultural thing, right? Most of the world doesn't think about the roar of the engine like us Americans.
Well, there's that. It sometimes in life you just gotta have fun.
I, I'm a gearhead myself, so my truck has a Hemi.
It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's a belief you were absolutely certain was the truth, but now you see is completely wrong?
That I was going to work in a company my entire life.
You learned that well.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the scariest thing in the world to leave the security of a regular paycheck. But looking back on it now, that was the riskiest time in my life because I was dependent on one company's set of decisions and future, where as a business owner, I'm diversified and it's dependent on me, not them.
Correct. And once you learn how to fish, you don't worry so much anymore,
No.
right? Like, is the fish coming today? And when they feed you the fish every day and you get used to it, and then one day they go, no more fish for you. And you don't know what to do, right?
Yes,
Hopefully you
absolutely.
saved up a little bit of fish.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're out of luck. And I think a lot of large companies right now are going through layoffs, and people
Heart-
don't realize the risk of having a job.
Yeah. It's heartbreaking watching what people are going through.
So true. What's one truth about success you wish more people understood?
That it's not about money.
No. Yet that's another lesson we were taught. Go chase the money, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it took me a long time to learn that money is just an equivalent for time. That's all it is. It's just a way to buy time for leisure, buy time for business ideas, buy time for leveraging it into larger amounts of time and money, and eventually giving that time to your family, giving it to your community. Right.
And I look at a lot of like when I look around the house at the things that need to be done, I'm like, well, how much would that cost me? Oh, that's a no brainer decision, right? Because I have that number.
Yes.
And if someone else is going to do it for a fraction of what my time is worth, why would I not just let them do it?
Exactly.
Unless there's a reason for it, I'm out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just a way to sort of have currency for time.
If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
Fail a lot.
There's that.
Yeah.
And so, you go back to Japanese culture.
Yeah.
Failure's not bad in Japanese culture.
No.
They don't, even in school, getting it wrong is not a problem.
Yeah.
Nobody laughs at you.
Yeah. It's the prison of expectations point I made earlier that I myself spent most of my life being much too timid to never take risks that I wasn't sure were going to succeed or pay off. That if I didn't think I could, be 100% confident that it was going to work, I just wouldn't do it because I don't want to have the downside. I don't want to have the loss. I don't want to have the failure. And the reality is the amount of time I spent paralyzed being afraid of doing something because I wasn't sure I could succeed I could have failed 5 times and learned every single time and been so much better off, so much quicker.
I think that's the new mantra: fail often, fail quick.
It
Right?
is.
That learn your lessons, get them moving, and
Amen.
don't let it hold you back.
Yeah.
If people would like to learn more about you, your services, the book, how do they do that?
Yeah, my personal author website that will have both this podcast and all the others that I do, as well as all the articles that we write and put into media, and also to be able to get the book, the Kindle, as well as the audiobook that I have narrated is at georgepesansky.com. And then myblendedlearning.com is my company website where we provide solutions for organizations big and small around helping drive change and improvement and developing the full potential of your employees.
Thank you so much for joining us
No,
today.
thank you so much. It was such a pleasure.
As you heard today, high performance isn't an accident. It's built almost brick by brick through better systems, clearer problems, and the courage to stop being the superhero and the fireman. George reminded us, if you can't walk away from your business and have the business continue working, you don't own a business, you own a job. That's okay, but be clear on what you have. Take a moment and ask yourself, where am I relying on heroes instead of systems? Where am I tolerating friction that my team has already been trying to tell me about? Maybe you're not listening to the front line. If you want help seeing the patterns in your business and turning chaos into profit and time freedom, that's what I do for my clients. You can find me through the links in the show notes. And if you know another business owner who needs to hear this, would you do me a favor and share it with them? I'd appreciate that. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.